Get ready to be inspired by the great things happening in rural education. The Rural Scoop will bring you new ideas and innovative solutions. We'll dive into education issues and we'll highlight what's working in your rural communities. You'll hear from a variety of educators, administrators, professionals, and others who will provide relevant and engaging content in each episode. And now, serving up the scoop, here's your host, Dr. Melissa Sadorf.
Well, public education runs on people who can turn policy into practice. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Megan Duncan, the new Executive Director of the Arkansas Association of Educational Administrators. Megan brings 2 decades of leadership from the classroom to rural superintendency to a state-level seat as Assistant Commissioner of Education to Deputy Superintendent in Fayetteville and Assistant Superintendent at Conway before stepping now into this statewide role. She's already launched the podcast AAEA The Voice, a platform that lifts up Arkansas's leaders and day-to-day realities behind the headlines. We're going to talk about what administrators need to know right now, where the pain points are in small and rural systems, and how her organization is helping turn good intentions into durable support. So let's get to it. Megan, welcome. Thank you for being with me today.
Thank you for the invitation and allowing me to join.
Well, I want to just dive right into it. So before we talk about AAEA, I want you to give us your background. What kinds of things have led you from your roles at ADE to Fayetteville to Conway, and then how does that shape your role right now as Executive Director?
Yes, I'm sure like many of your guests, it's not a straight trajectory. You have ebbs and flows that come through that. And my parents were both educators. And so I knew I did not want to be a teacher. And going through the process of watching them and then finding myself in a different career path, it just wasn't fulfilling. It wasn't providing me what I needed. And I guess, the DNA for us as teachers is grown deep, and made my way into education, thankfully. I was hired in a school district and began teaching and loved working with students, and then was able to transition into the principalship, and then served as a superintendent in the Wicks School District and Elkin School District, and then was an associate superintendent in Northwest Arkansas in Springdale, and then deputy superintendent in Fayetteville. And along that path, had an opportunity to serve as Assistant Commissioner of Learning Services, which taught me a very different view of education and, frankly, the difference in policy engagement and policy advancement, and what a huge impact it can have on the ability for people to be engaged and people to network and get together. I have been a member of AAEA. We are the Arkansas Association of Educational Administrators, and have been a member of that group for decades, and have had that level of professional development and mentorship poured into me. My first boss that hired me as a teacher was also the executive director of AAEA, Dr. Richard Abernathy. And so it's truly a full circle moment. So when this opportunity came about to join and become the executive director, it was definitely a dream job of mine, pulling all of those parts together, having worked in various parts of the state. I grew up in Southeast Arkansas in Stuttgart, and each part of the state has its own unique geography and its own unique makeup and population. And so being able to work with people in different areas and being able to connect people with the opportunities that are available in those areas is definitely a passion of mine.
Mm. Can you talk a little bit about a lesson from district operations that you're bringing directly into the work that you're doing now?
Yes, it impacts what I do in my current role every day. Sometimes there can be a divide between what you do as boots on the ground as a superintendent or a district leader and what that looks like in terms of putting that policy into practice. And so having the conversations to say, this is what the language said, this is what the request would be, these are what have matriculated in the rules, and then these are those stopping blocks or the things that make it more challenging to implement, or frankly, unintended outcomes that we have sometimes for our children. We are implementing some of the requirements, or we're implementing some of the policy or the practice, and we are not seeing those positive results that we want from our children achieving in academics. And so understanding that it really does take everyone to have a voice, for everyone to come together to be a united entity to reach the highest levels, not just in educating our children, but in terms of educating each other, us as adults learners as well.
Yeah. Now, you've been in this role actually since as long as I've been in my role, which was July 1st of this last year. And so you've had a chance to get the lay of the land and a little bit about what superintendents or principals need on the ground. So when a rural leader calls AAEA today, that's a mouthful.
AAEA, yes.
AAEA. When they call you, what are the top concerns that you're helping them solve this past 6 months?
I think it marries both the business side background and it also marries the educational experience, so that when we're trying to come forward and assist rural superintendents, really tapping into what challenges are we facing, and how varied those are across the state of Arkansas. And so it's remembering that we have many challenges along the way of working with children and making sure that the policy really meets those needs. So a lot of times questions come about concerning budgetary needs. How are we going to make this? What does this look like? Some of our more rural schools are experiencing our student attendance, or what we refer to in Arkansas, the average daily membership. They're seeing a decline in those numbers. And that's pretty consistent across the state of Arkansas. And so, of course, as you know, when you have fewer children who are attending, you have less funds at the table, which means that you have to make some real decisions. So we have some rural superintendents that are currently faced with fiscal distress. And one of my first superintendencies, I got to experience fiscal distress. I didn't help us get there, but it was very, very challenging. And anything that you can do to avoid finding yourself or your community in that situation, you want to make sure that you are doing the very best you can in being steadfast with the monies that you do have available. So making those changes early on and understanding that, as we all know, the majority of those funds and the costs come from personnel. And so sometimes you've got to make some really, really incredibly hard decisions, decisions that live with you decades later that you wish you didn't have to make, but were necessary based on the circumstances and the data that you have at the time.
Yeah. To kind of set the stage for rural in Arkansas, can you talk a little bit about what rural education looks like? I mean, the percentage of districts that are considered rural, or some of the geography challenges that those rural leaders are facing?
Yes. I would say that, if you look at the state of Arkansas, a lot of Arkansas is rural in comparison to a lot of our neighbors on the east and the west coast of the United States. We do have some very specific challenges in some of our regions just based off of geography alone. The topography of getting from one location to another location, or being able to run a bus route from one location to another location. Also the square miles that are available in that area, and being able to transport students, efficiently and effectively can be a challenge. We've got also very different climates that happen between what is occurring in Northwest Arkansas and what occurs in Southeast or Southwest or South Central Arkansas. And so all of those things kind of come into play, with the exception of what we're experiencing right now in this winter storm. it typically doesn't blanket the entire state. We typically see bands that occur, and that brings all a host of other opportunities and challenges that rural superintendents work through in a very different way. I think that one commonality that we have in the state of Arkansas is, regardless of the numbers of students that you serve, whether you're in the smallest district or you're in a larger district, having worked on both ends of that spectrum, the challenges are the same. You still have to turn in the same reports. You still have to turn in the same requirements for the Department of Education or to USAID. And so although there may be more zeros on those dollars, in a rural district, we typically have much less help. You are a one-man band that is doing everything to accomplish all of those reports and all of the guidance that comes out. And in a rural situation, as a rural superintendent, that can be very overwhelming. The other thing that we are seeing nationwide, and we're also seeing in Arkansas as well, is a big shift in leadership churn. We are having large changes and large new numbers of people that are coming in, retirees that are transitioning to Chapter 2 for them, which, kudos to them. That's everyone earns that and wants to reach that goal. But what that has brought is some loss of our history, some loss of our how did we get here, the conversation of that. And you know what they say about history, if you don't know what it is, you potentially are bound to repeat it. And so I think we need to be mindful of who we do have that we can call on as resources, and where are we getting that information? Podcasts like yours, organizations like AAEA providing information and that unity to where when you are a rural superintendent and you are faced with some tough decisions like we did today, do I keep school open today or do I close it for the safety of students and for staff members? Understanding that you're not alone, you're not in isolation making those decisions, and it can feel incredibly isolating. The position alone as superintendency is very isolating. But you add geographic isolation on top of that, it can feel even more so. And so being able to reach out and connect with people through organizations like AAEA is a great connector so that everyone has the same information. One of the things that we do each week in an effort to further overcome that, our organization hosts a weekly AAEA Superintendent Zoom. And that is about bringing people together from across the state of Arkansas to talk about hot topics and to talk about what they may be facing or be challenged with in that particular week, which can change week to week. And so, as you stated, you're new in your role and I'm new in this role. So this is my first snow day experience. And we went ahead and held our Zoom this morning. And we had over 100 superintendents that joined that, which tells you the level of dedication and that the work never stops. Whether we have a snow day or we don't have a snow day, your work as a superintendent always continues. But their willingness to hop on, Arkansas has some of the best superintendents in the United States, and being willing to hop on while they're working through all the other logistics that severe weather can bring. They still took time out to pour into their professional learning to make sure that they had the most accurate and the most current information. And so that's a true testament to the educators that we have here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate the no man is an island approach to standing up those opportunities to network, because it is so hard in a rural community. It's hard anyway, but it's certainly hard when you don't have neighbors close by.
Yes.
I want to shift a little bit, Megan, and talk a little bit how pull on your assistant commissioner lens.
Okay.
From your time as commissioner, what was your playbook for translating rulemaking really into usable guidance that really saved leaders time and risk? Because there's a lot that they have to navigate.
So navigating the world as an assistant commissioner in the state of Arkansas is also equally challenging. It is a lack of information on both sides. At a district level, not understanding what is happening at the state level when those rules are promulgated, and what that looks like is incredibly difficult. And so paying homage to the people that are working in those roles as assistant commissioners or as department employees, a lot of times they don't have the information either. And there is no perfect playbook to be able to lean on. A lot of times you are learning in real time, and you also understand that you have all of these constituents that are out there that they want an answer, and they want an answer right now, and you may not know what that answer is. And so the first part is receiving whatever the new requirement is or the new law is as an assistant commissioner, and then working as a team with the fellow assistant commissioners or deputy commissioners or the secretary of education, and working through as a collective, what do we think the implications of this could be, and thinking through that. I may also be reaching out and having conversations with independent superintendents and just individuals that that are educators across the state to say, hey, tell me how this would impact you. Tell me what this would be in that realm. It's also having the conversations with the legislators on the other side to make sure that whatever you have written or you propose to write aligns tightly with what their desired outcomes were when the law was passed. So making sure that you have clear interpretation and you have a clear understanding of what that needs to be. I think the second part is Arkansas has a very strategic and in-law process that requires the rules to go through public comment, to go to the State Board of Education, and then to go to our ALC committee at large. And so all of that can have its own ping pong effect. So you can have a good set of rules and you can be ready to dispense them, and someone along the authority in the approval chain isn't on the same page with what the proposal is. And that can sometimes cause that timeline, that duration, that latency period to be even longer. And so that is what is hard as an assistant commissioner. You want to get them out as soon as you can, and you don't always have the privilege or the ability to do that. On the other side, as a rural superintendent or working in a rural district, you need that information, and you needed it yesterday. And so it's a pull and a challenge on both ends. So at AAEA, our job is to hopefully stand in the gap of what that means, which is, okay, we do have this. We would like to help interpret it the best we can so that we are giving the best advice possible. Oftentimes, rules don't come out for many months until after the law is in effect. And so we want to make sure that superintendents that have, especially if it's an emergency clause and it goes into effect July 1st, that they have the information that they need so that they can start school in August and ensure that they are following the letter of the law as closely as they can until rules do become available.
Is there a current rule where translation and not more mandates, because nobody needs more of those, would unlock better implementation? I mean, to your point, they need to have understanding of what's being asked.
I think on our end, we're trying to educate and ensure that all of our superintendents understand what the rulemaking process is and understand what that entails on the end of the department. We also try to serve as a liaison between when we are hearing specific questions or things coming from superintendents. If I've answered the same question 4 or 5 times, chances are there's 4 or 5 others who have not yet reached out. And so if we can add that to that weekly conversation for hot topics. So for example, today, one of the conversations we're having is about health insurance and how health insurance will be paid going forward. And so the department was gracious enough to get on the Zoom and have the conversation. Superintendents were able to listen to the information that was shared. And then they were able to also ask questions in chat or come on and ask their question directly with the department employee there. So the goal of that is to try to cut down on misinformation so that they are hearing it directly from the department, and to also know that it's a safe space. If you're afraid to maybe reach out, or if you're feeling maybe embarrassed because you don't know, or maybe overwhelmed because you don't know, whichever is true, or just the lack of information, it hasn't yet flown to you. Hopefully that serves in that gap to say, okay, department, we're hearing this, we may have sent out information and we may have done a training on it, but yet there still might be some misinformation. And then, okay, superintendents, they have done training, they have done this, and here's where their resources, here's where they're curated, and they're going to be on to share a little more about what this actually means and how it impacts you as a superintendent. So just the back and forth dialogue, constantly having that conversation back and forth is helpful. It helps us to better assist superintendents, and it also hopefully helps and assists the department to understand where the messaging is falling or misinformation might be held so that they can then provide the assistance to districts as well.
That's great proactive approaches to making sure that people have what they need. I want to talk a little bit about rural leadership realities in Arkansas. Megan, can you share with us what might be uniquely hard and, quite frankly, uniquely powerful about leading in Arkansas's rural districts based upon your own experience as a principal and superintendent?
I think the uniqueness is being able to have such a close relationship with each child, being able to have such close relationships with their families, and being able to have close relationships with staff members. It is a huge advantage to being able to provide correct information or support, which sometimes might go unnoticed in a larger district. I think that is a huge advantage. I think the other advantage is as quickly as things may be off track, is as quickly as things can get on track. You can make great changes very swiftly to make improvements in a very rapid way in a rural district. In comparison with a larger district, it's much more of an iceberg. It's much more of a cruise ship that's a little slower to turn, to be reactive to the system. Like, yes, we can give the training, but we don't have to train 3 of you. We have to train 300 of you. And so what does that look like? And what's the process to accomplish? You also sometimes in a larger district don't have the benefit of knowing the family as well. And that can sometimes create a deficiency about their willingness to come forward to share with you something that may be a challenge for them that you might have been able to help or you might have been able to absolve. The schoolhouse is the place of the community, and I think athletics is a big part of that. You have huge turnouts in a rural district for people to join in the conversation and to get behind the team. And you typically don't have high schools that are split. You typically don't have separate mascots. You can all get behind the same entity and cheer on the Ricebirds together. And so I think that is also a huge benefit of being a rural superintendent. I would also say as a practitioner side, everyone is so willing to help. All you have to do is reach out and ask for help, and people will help you in the state of Arkansas. So it is very comforting, 1, to know that you do have that ability to reach out, and 2, to know that you don't have to know everything. It's okay if you don't. It's not expected that you know every single detail of every single thing. But if you do need help, being able to reach out is another big benefit.
That's so well said. Are you seeing in Arkansas an issue with the pipeline, not just for teachers, because we know that that's alive and present in all of our communities, not just rural across the country. But the administrator pipeline is something that we've been seeing in rural, and they're now starting to see it in other locales as well. Can you talk a little bit about what it looks like in Arkansas and what you are doing with AAEA to strengthen that pipeline for principals and superintendents, especially in thin staff systems where they may not have a bench?
Yes. As we talked about earlier, that leadership churn is real. And so losing the history and the expertise of that is the danger. Also, the backfill of that. It is a trajectory in that typically in Arkansas, we have people who transition through phases of leadership, and superintendency being the epitome of where some people actually want to find themselves in leadership. And so what that creates then is we have superintendents who are transitioning out of the system, or they're no longer in education, whichever is true. We see then, the poaching beginning to happen for our secondary principals and our middle level principals and elementary principals being moved up in those ranks, which then creates a deficit there, which then impacts the classroom because it's a domino effect.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that we've got a lot of work that we've got to do with higher education. One of the things that we are doing specifically to ensure that we have more people who are coming into the field and more people that are aware, Arkansas as a whole has redesigned all of their scholarship access. So if you want to become an educator in Arkansas, it has never been cheaper and it's never been a better time to get into a higher education and to obtain your degree to become an educator. And so I think that will be able to be very helpful and will yield a lot of results. Our Commissioner of Higher Education, Dr. Ken Warden, has done a phenomenal job of really beginning to partner with K-12, which in Arkansas is hugely beneficial, not only for higher education, but to also ensure that we are providing the output that they need to be able to educate at the higher ed end. And so that has been a wonderful change. Secretary Oliva, who is our Secretary of Education, he has combined the houses of pre-K and higher education in with K-12. So we now have one entity that's together. And the benefit of that is having those P21 conversations longitudinally, that it doesn't just stop here or start here, that it should flow and there should be some progression. So we're very excited about the work that he's done in that area. And then Dr. Warden has gone a step further, and he has allowed us to create a partnership with AAEA and with ADHE to come together to have superintendents, both rural and more urban superintendents, to come together, and those focus leaders in the higher ed realm and deans that are in varied geographic locations to come together and do a P21 partnership, to where we're having those conversations about, well, what are the pain points and what does that look like? And then how can we release those barriers? And if we can align those systems, what we should see is a yield of more people coming into the field of education, and then allowing each partner to come to the table to provide that professional development. We have 14 constituent groups, 14 boards, 13 constituent groups in AAEA, and they represent anything from our special education supervisors to our GT coordinators to our human resources, our CFOs, superintendents, principals. Each group has a mission to ensure that that particular group that they serve, as school plant managers or technology specialists, that they have the support and the professional learning that they need. And so we are constantly trying to provide quality professional learning experiences so that everyone has that most recent information. And as people are coming new into those roles, even beyond the superintendency, that they have the support. In a rural district, that's also incredibly important.
That's interesting, Megan, that you have operations within your different divisions. That's unusual, and I'd like to step into that a little bit. In your experience, those are unseen operations, and can you talk a little bit about the decisions that they're having to make that really have an impact on classroom outcomes, and how you as an organization help those people and those districts make better decisions, faster decisions, things that really do move the needle for students at the end of the day?
Yes, they are definitely the veins in the blood of the organization. It's nothing you want to see, but you sure do need it. And so making sure that they feel connected and that they have a sense of community across the state of Arkansas is also just as important as it is for our superintendents. There are also so many changes that come about. Particularly in rural situations, we may have people that start in a position as a bookkeeper, and then they may be leaving as a bookkeeper. And then you've got a new superintendent and you have a new bookkeeper, and that can be a tricky time. Mm-hmm. And so providing that support and making sure that everybody has, one, the information that they need, but also understands that everybody has had a first day doing something. And that comes with a lot of excitement, of course, but it also comes with a lot of angst. And so you want to do a good job and you want to perform at high levels. And You don't want to get into that place of being lulled into apathy. And so being current and being aware of what those things are is so important. Our school business officials, they have an entire credentialing process that takes brand new people that are new in their roles and shepherds them through that process to where they have coaching, but then they also have courses that they're able to achieve their certification levels to ensure that they are compliant, but also aware of what the compliance is. And so that's been incredibly helpful. And then partnering beyond that with our principal organizations to make sure that there's leadership and development happening in those ranks is equally important. So of our 13 constituent groups, one of the constants I would say in each of them is that we have groups of learners who really want to learn. There is no one that's coming to work hoping to do a poor job. Each person wants to do the very best that they can for children. And so as we look at data outcomes, whether those are fiscal outcomes or whether those are academic outcomes or whether those are facility outcomes, each of those help to write a story and tell a narrative of where can we better support particular groups and in what regions. If we're seeing, particular heat maps or populations that have a higher need or a more significant need, okay, what can we do to push in additional services to help this area or this region?
That's great. One of the things that you've done just recently is launch a podcast for administrators, which I love. I think that's phenomenal. The AAEA, The Voice, and you're focused on elevating practitioner stories. Can you talk about some of the themes that you're already seeing rising to the top and how you're going to use those insights to shape AAEA services for your membership?
Yes, I think we have many people who have many stories to tell. And unfortunately, if we are in a rural situation or with some of our most premier educators, they are also the most humble and they're not willing to always share or tell their story. And so the goal of the podcast is to educate and to get that information out. Even if they're not willing to kind of toot their own horn, us being able to have a dialogue and being able to ask those questions so that they can say, well, here's how I navigated this, or this is what that would look like. A lot of times as a teacher or even a principal, you will look at someone who is particularly successful in their role as a superintendent, and it might seem unattainable. It might also seem like, wow, they just jumped from here to there, and now they're at the top pinnacle of their career. But that's often not the case. What we're hearing in our stories is the road is very varied, that it is a lot of ups and downs and a lot of grace that's been shared with them along the path so that they can be successful and they are able to kind of pour back into children and pour back into staff members. And so in our efforts to be humble, I think that sometimes our story is not being told. And so it is about amplifying what's happening and what's happening well in public education and giving specific examples of that, even if our educators might be a little more reluctant to do that on a larger stage. It's important for us to have a voice and to fill that void, or someone will help fill it for us. And so we want to make sure that we have good connections and that there is accurate information going on and going out about what is happening in our public schools.
I love that. Can you talk a little bit about how that might tie in then to some of your advocacy work? Because the story and the data point together are what really move hearts and minds.
Yes. So on the advocacy end, we're working through a project called Arkansas Advantage, which is a highlight reel, which focuses on highlighting districts across the state of Arkansas and telling their story about what's happening inside the building day to day with children in classrooms and with teachers in classrooms, and how our leaders are leading from the building level all the way through the district. And so that partnership is with our school districts across the state, and we are driving to them. We're going on site if they allow us, and we are doing photos and taking pictures and just do an interview with them to talk about what that looks like. So we're trying to work through those multimodal communications so that we are, however you consume content, in whatever way that is, that it reaches you. And oftentimes it can reach a legislator to better inform them of their practice and their policy advisement, particularly as we move into our fiscal session, which will be this spring. It helps them to have some of that information to understand when you are hearing these things, this is also the other part of the story that you might not have heard.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I want to step kind of a little bit further with that, because superintendents obviously work with a board that's their boss.
Yes.
And can you talk a little bit about your best guidance to a novice superintendent? Because to your point earlier, we do have some churn in who's sitting in those seats. Ensuring that the board is aligned to student outcomes, because the narrative out there can get pretty noisy and things can get lost. So what do you let new superintendents or novice superintendents know they need to be thinking about?
To know their North Star, know what that North Star is, and don't deviate from it. Mm-hmm. Ensure that your North Star is pinned on student achievement and not to be swayed into what's comfortable for adults in comparison with what you should be doing for children. And so finding your North Star, knowing what it is, and then telling your story, being willing to tell your story to get the information out, whether it's to your local community or the state at large. We are a very small state. We're a very connected state. And so that information travels very quickly. And sometimes if the information's correct, that's a good thing. If the information's not correct, it's not such a good thing. But being able to educate our new superintendents on what that looks like, which is transparency, having conversations with board members. In Arkansas, you typically have a 5 or a 7 member board that you're navigating. Each of those 5 or 7 come with their own set of personalities. And I'm sure not where you're located, but sometimes it also comes with their own agenda, which is why they ran for the board in the first place. And so knowing what that is and knowing how to navigate that is really helpful. The other thing that we've talked with superintendents about, we are meeting with our new superintendent groups prior to those morning meetings. We're having intermittent meetings with them to just have hot topic conversations with them in a smaller group. Maybe it's a little more comfortable setting. Maybe I'm not intimidated by, several hundred being on a call, that I can kind of ask questions that I might not ask otherwise. But the other is we're trying to navigate how to communicate. And when you run up against something that's really tough or really challenging, understanding that likely someone else has already gone through this, mm-hmm. and there is some template or something that is available for them. And one of the things that we just talked about at our superintendent symposium last week was communication strategies and knowing where you can find that. And oftentimes as a rural superintendent, you don't have a communications director. You don't have a communications liaison. That is you. You are a party of one. And one tool that is out and that is available is through NSPRA. It is the National Public Schools Association, and it provides information all about communication and how to communicate. And districts can actually join for about $200 a year. It's very low cost. And what they receive is a playbook of pre-written communications that they can then pull, customize, and make their own. And then they can push that forward in terms of whatever the scenario is that they're working through. And there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of those responses that have already been prepared for matching whatever it is, whether it's a tragedy or a weather situation or you name it, it's in there. And so that's one of the guidance pieces that we try to provide, to say, you're not going to know every answer, but here's a playbook that you might consider. The other is we're working on building the AAEA Elevate portal, which will allow you to have a task tracker and a real-time estimator to let you know that, okay, it's October. What should I be doing as a superintendent? What reports should I anticipate? What things should I have ready in the state of Arkansas? So instead of trying to Google and get maybe a mass overload of misinformation back, really curating specific resources to go into those components. And as we talked about, we have those 13 constituent groups. So each of those constituent groups will have their own place where they can live and have breathing documents that inform what their practice is. And TIPS has been a great partner in that to help us to kind of bring that forward, to provide their information. 𝐄𝐩𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬 Roofing is going to provide information about facilities and how to go through some preventative maintenance things to think about, which is really helpful. And then we have a partnership with American Fidelity, and they're going to give information about all of the things that are HR, insurance navigation, and the big hot topics that come forward when people have specific needs in education. So we're very excited about bringing the portal to the forefront.
Wow. So 12 months from now, Megan, you've had a year and a half under your belt. What are you going to look to be different? I mean, these are amazing programs that you're going to be standing up. But what should members be thinking about and tapping into in 12 months?
We will be entering a general session. And so my hope would be for our team, and I had a former boss, Dr. Jim Rollins, who would always tell me hope is not a plan. Our plan is to be that we are prepared for that legislative session and that we are ready as a united group to help inform our legislators. And we have a group that reaches out and reaches in with their legislators to have the conversations to inform the type of policy that we do need to shape education. In addition, we have a lot of policy changes that we've experienced in Arkansas in the last several years, and so many wonderful new policies have come forward to truly support educators in their practice and children in their schools. And so also an opportunity to get good at some of the policy that's been passed, to become more aware and more adept of implementing some of the changes that have already been legislated. But hopefully a connection, our ability to connect with each other and ability to inform each other, and frankly, to have some grace for each other, to understand that we're all coming at this conversation from a different perspective. And if we can do that in a respectful way, and we can do that with the ability to remember that cooler heads always prevail and that we are all here for the children in Arkansas. If we can keep that as our North Star, then we'll be doing very well for ourselves.
It's a model for the rest of the country, I would say.
Yes.
So, Megan, I always end with the same question, and that is, what does the term rural advantage mean to you?
Rural advantage, it is the advantage. Being in a rural district has so many advantages in terms of, as we talked about, connecting with people, connecting with your practice, but also connecting back with yourself. It is a great gut check to make sure, are you doing the right thing and the very best thing that you can for each child every day? And are you where you need to be? One of the conversations we have with some of our more seasoned leaders is this idea of shelf life. Like, when is it time to say when? And when is it time to know when you need to transition? So I think that the advantage is having that network and having the ability to know people around you and be supported around you is the advantage. We have an uncannily ability to know when people have needs or have heard that they might have needs, and being able to reach across and help one another. I've seen such coordination happening from not geographically contiguous districts working with one another in various parts of the state. And it really reaffirms that at the end of the day, we are all teachers, we're all leaders, and we all want the best for our children. And that, to me, is the advantage of being in a rural state and working in a rural district.
That's a wonderful answer. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
So I want to say thank you for being here, for bringing really a practitioner's eye to a statewide role and really laying out the support that Arkansas administrators can expect because they need it right now. That clear translation from policy to practice and a stronger pipeline in small systems and really some decisions, whether it's operations or any other of those 14 constituency groups, that really will move the needle for learning. So thanks for spending some time with me today.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the invitation.
Friends, if this conversation sparked an idea, carry one step this week into your work. Name a support system that your team needs, or cut one routine that no longer serves students, and tell a better story at your next board meeting. Data plus a face. So if the Rural Scoop is helping you lead with purpose, please like the episode, subscribe to the show, leave me a comment with your takeaway, and share this episode with a colleague who cares about rural schools, especially if they're in Arkansas, because those signals really help other leaders find us. I'm your host, Melissa Sadorf, and remember, in rural leadership, our strength is our shared story. When we lead together, we thrive together. I'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Rural Scoop. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep these important rural conversations going. And we'd love to hear from you, so feel free to leave a comment or share your thoughts. You can follow along and never miss a new release by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform or by following us on social. We're on YouTube at The Rural Scoop, Instagram at msadorf1, and X at msadorf03. The Rural Scoop is produced with support from Vela Educational Consultants. To learn more, visit velaconsultants.com. See you next time for more great discussions about rural education. And as always, keep leaning in to the rural advantage.